Hey guys, it's KevyDog4. I'm going to have to go through this video fairly quickly because I just tried to film it and I was already down to crunch time, but now my computer died as I was filming it, and so now there are 30 minutes till the first playoff game starts, and I have to get this video filmed. So my predictions were really quick, so they may not be as accurate as otherwise had I taken time to look at the schedules and how they had done as of recently, and their rosters and stuff like that. But I just kind of did it all off the top of my head on what I've been seeing over the last few weeks as the teams fight for their playoff spots. So here goes my video. So first thing I'm going to do is show you my preseason predictions. I made two of them, if you remember, if you were watching my videos earlier this year. These ones came from when I predicted one team at a time in my 30 teams in 30 days series type of thing. And my second ones came from after I did those, and I reseeded every team based on the final rosters and other factors like that. So here are my first predictions from 30 teams in 30 days. I had Cleveland, Toronto, Boston, Miami, Milwaukee, Atlanta, Charlotte, and Detroit. The West, I had San Antonio, Golden State, Los Angeles Clippers, Portland, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and Utah. So based on these, I was fairly close on choosing my teams. I chose the same teams both times that I did my preseason predictions, just in different orders. Turns out my second ones were probably more accurate in the seeding. But in the East, the teams that I predicted that did not make it were Miami. Whoops. Forgot to grab my pen. But they were Miami, which finished 9th. Charlotte finished 11th, and Detroit finished 10th. And the teams that made it instead were Washington, Indiana, and Chicago. And in the West, it was Dallas, and the team that made it instead of them, can't think of it, Houston. It was Houston, and Dallas ended up finishing 11th in the West. So my second predictions, same thing. I just had the order different. Cleveland, Toronto, Boston was the same. Atlanta moved up. Milwaukee stayed the same. Charlotte, Detroit, Miami, different positions, but still the same three teams that were actually eliminated this year. San Antonio and Golden State stayed the same. Los Angeles, Portland stayed the same. Oklahoma City moved up. Dallas moved down. And Utah and Memphis switched places. So here are the current playoff seedings and my predictions for them. So we're having Golden State as 1 in the West, San Antonio, Houston, Los Angeles, Utah, Oklahoma City, Memphis, and Portland. So those are the West. The East is Boston, Cleveland, Toronto, Washington, Atlanta, Milwaukee, Indiana, and Chicago. So based on what I've been seeing over the last few weeks, based on who's been winning, who's on a big run right now, and who's kind of falling off, here are my predictions. I'm going to start in the East with Boston versus Chicago. I think Cleveland, they had every opportunity to be the number 1 seed. I just don't think they wanted to be because they struggled against Chicago this year. And this bottom half of the bracket down here with Toronto, Milwaukee, Cleveland, and Indiana is probably the weaker half of the bracket for the East. And so they lost several games at the end of the season that they should have won. They lost to Atlanta twice, which bumped them up to a 5, and Milwaukee down to a 6, even though Milwaukee had a better end to the season and had everything gone as it should have with Cleveland winning at least one of those 2 games. Milwaukee probably would have ended up being the 5 seed. So this is how it was seeded based on Cleveland losing all those games at the end of the season. That put Boston at 1. And they're playing Chicago, and Boston has had an incredible season, and there's no way I can go against them with Chicago. Chicago's really been up and down. So Boston's my pick for this. Jumping down to Cleveland, Indiana, despite their late season struggles, I think Cleveland's going to bounce back very quickly, and they're clearly better than Indiana. They're a much more talented team. I'll be very surprised if they lose this series. So I'm taking Cleveland here. 3 versus 6, Toronto versus Milwaukee. This is one of 2 upsets I predicted for the entire playoffs here. Or I guess one of 3, technically, based on seeding. But I'm picking Milwaukee because they have been one of the hottest teams coming out of this last month of the year. The other really hot team was Portland in the West, but Milwaukee won, I think, 14 of 16 games or something similar to that at one point between March and April. Toronto has also had a really good run. They've been really consistent all year, but Milwaukee, if they can keep up the momentum that they had coming into this, it's really hard to go against them, and I think that they're going to win in either 6 or 7 games. So I pick Milwaukee here. Washington, Atlanta. Atlanta, to me, is still seeded too high for what kind of a team they are. They should be a 6 seed, but once again, Cleveland, with their struggles at the end of the year, put them at 5 instead because they beat them twice in ways that they should not have ever had even a chance. Washington has had a really, really good season that was really unexpected for me. I didn't see them making it even near the playoffs. I thought they'd be one of the worst teams in the entire league. But Washington has had a great season. They've been really strong as of late, and I find it hard to go against them in the first round here, so I'm going to take Washington. So I'm just going to finish up the East, and then I'll move to the West and then show you my final prediction. So Boston, Washington. Washington, once again, still has been really, really good. But Boston, almost no one that plays them really stands much of a chance. There's a reason that they're the number 1 seed in the East. They're a very talented team. And they've got lots of youth, and so does Washington. But Isaiah Thomas, playing against him in the fourth quarter, it's really, really hard to play against a guy like that in the fourth quarter, and he can bring a team back from anywhere. So I'm taking Boston against Washington. And then Cleveland, Milwaukee. Cleveland won 3 of 4 meetings this year. I think Milwaukee's definitely going to give them a run for their money, but still, I think Cleveland still is going to win this series. So that would leave Boston versus Cleveland in the conference finals. And to me, the difference between these two teams is Cleveland's team is very old. Like, most of the players are in their 30s. They have very little young players. Like, they have Kyrie and they have Kay Felder and Tristan Thompson. But that's about it for their youth in that team. Kevin Love's fairly young too, but most of them are older than LeBron, if not his same age. So Boston has a lot younger of a team. Like, most of their team I've seen play in Summer League over the past couple years. Isaiah Thomas is still very young, and they don't have a lot of veterans, but they have a lot of young talent, and in the end, they're going to have more endurance than Cleveland. So I have Boston making it down to the finals here for the East. So I'm going to jump back over to the West with Golden State and Portland. Golden State, I mean, Portland's been really strong, and I think that they're going to beat them a couple times, but you can't really go against Golden State after the kind of season they've had. Once again, they had 67 wins, which isn't that far off of the 73-win season they had last year. So I'm going to take Golden State. San Antonio versus Memphis is the series we saw last year as well. San Antonio swept them, and I expect them, even though they struggled in the last few games of the season, I still expect them to be really, really hot coming into the playoffs. Especially against Memphis. So I'm taking San Antonio. 3 versus 6 is Houston, Oklahoma City. It's the battle of the 2 leading MVP candidates, James Harden and Russell Westbrook, who both had ridiculous seasons and lots of triple-doubles each. However, I think Oklahoma City is not going to be able to stand a chance against Houston. Houston's really, really been quietly good. I don't know very many of their players. So to me, it was a huge surprise going into the season because I was just like, who are these guys? And they do have some really strong players on that team, but they're not as well known as Golden State's players or San Antonio's players, etc., etc. But Houston is a team that has been dominant, and Oklahoma City really, really struggled at the end of the season, and it's hard to go against Houston. So I'm taking Houston. And then Clippers versus Utah. This was one of my other upsets. I had Utah winning. They have the exact same record. It literally came down to a tiebreaker. Clippers won 3 of 4 regular season, but the Jazz have beat teams that have been so good. They beat the Cavs at home. They beat the Spurs. I mean, it took them a few times, but they got better and better and better. They lost by 20 early on. I don't know if they played them. I guess they must have played them 4 times. But a couple weeks ago, they lost by 7, and then they won eventually. They beat the Warriors at the end of the season without Gordon Hayward. This team can be unstoppable. I know that watching them, they're so solid. And people may not know a lot of their players, but Utah's got a really, really strong team. And so now I'm going to go with Golden State Jazz. Still, once again, Golden State, the season they've had, it's hard not to have them at least going to the conference finals. So I do, but Utah is definitely going to give them a run for their money, no doubt. Houston, San Antonio. San Antonio just, to me, is so dominant every year, and their players, they have young players, they have veterans. I've watched their D-League team, and they send their guys down to the D-League. They have DeJounte Murray and Bryn Forbes that go down there a lot, and they bring them down, and then they bring them back up, and in the case of Bryn Forbes, he had a 22-point half after being down in the D-League. So the way they manage their team is really, really good because they let their younger players get time in the D-League so they don't have rust, and then they let them play in actual games. So they let everyone play. So if they go down with injuries, they're going to be fine because they have backups. Houston is a really good shooting team as far as I've heard, but to me, San Antonio is going to be totally fine here. And that leaves Golden State versus San Antonio. To me, Golden State, as good of a season they've had, if they get off, like if they can't shoot their threes, as we saw last year against the Cavs in the finals, they just fall apart. And to me, San Antonio, they can do everything. They've got Aldridge is really good. Kawhi is very impressive on offense and on defense. I've seen this team play live. It's so hard to go against them ever. So here's San Antonio. I have them playing against Boston in the finals. And to be having the veterans from the Spurs as well as the youth, while Boston just has youth, San Antonio's got this experience of winning championships. So to me, they're taking the whole thing. So my prediction is San Antonio winning the championship this year. So let me know what you think. Who are you predicting? Who would you like to see win? Make sure you give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment below, subscribe to my channel, and today's games, in case you're wondering, the first one is Pacers-Cavs at 3 o'clock Eastern, and then that's on ABC, and then there are 3 more games after that. They're all on ESPN. Bucks-Raptors is 5:30 Eastern, and Grizzlies-Spurs is 8 Eastern, and Jazz-Clippers is 10:30 Eastern time. So there's a full schedule of games today, and the other 4 games for the game ones will be tomorrow. So thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in my next video.